Okay. Here. Okay, so if you, it's Drush number 1, but we're not going to go the whole thing. We're actually going to learn.
615.
Right, but we're actually going to go to page 630. It's in the middle of the Drush. He actually in the Haggadah Shal Pesach, similar to the other ways and one that we just learned about Tazria, he gives alternative options to different questions. One of the questions that he mentions is why is matzah, if we want matzah to be, he asks this question about matzah. The main question he asks about matzah in general is about the whole idea of why do we have to eat it? Why are we remembering something that was done in so fast, right? It doesn't make sense. So the Zera Shimshon asked that question, basically saying is that we have to make. Let me see here. His question is. His original question. 1 second here. There we go. So original question is, right? Why do we? Why the original question of this drush is why do we eat this matzah? And what do we know? We say because we didn't have time to make the bread properly, right? So he says, he says we have a question. He says, I don't understand. Weren't they? It says you should eat. Were they not already commanded to eat matzah before? As it says, Shivat Yamim Matzot. It means you should eat for a 7-day period. That commandment of eating matzah was told to them before the fact that they ran away. We're doing a quick Haggadah Shal Pesach piece. We just did a nice little piece on Haggadah Shal Pesach. It's Drush Aleph and Haggadah Shal Pesach in Shmot. At the end of Sefer Shmot.
Which one?
Aleph. We're just going through the Drush. So in the middle of the Drush of Aleph, which is talking about matzah and the whole idea of running through matzah, he asks a wonderful question.
What page are you on?
It's going to be right. So it says here. The question is in the English. It's on page 630. In the Shmot one, it starts. It's Drush Aleph and Haggadah Shal Pesach, but it starts where the words vata with a vav ayin taf hey atam mevair atam. And now, right? Okay. So you see that? You got it?
Yeah.
Okay. You see that's a Drush Aleph, but it's like towards the middle of the Aleph. Mm-hmm. Okay. So now we have a wonderful question that he asks. The question is, we all say va'afilu chachamim va'afilu nevonim, right? Mm-hmm. What does that mean? He's asking the question. Vata meveratam lamotian be'achazaka she'ilu otian. Okay. Are anu v'anenu v'ayu. Okay. And then he says va'afilu kulanu chachamim kulanu mitzvah alinu saper. And then he says, "Yesh l'daktek my sal kadatach shachachamim v'anovim yuptorim mitzvah zo." Simple question. He says, why would we even think that the chachamim, right? It says afilu chachamim means. Here's the test. Yeah, we hear the test outside. So he says here. He says, why could we ask the question? Why would we think that a person who's chacham would be patur from the mitzvah? Right? It says va'afilu, meaning even the chachamim have to say this mitzvah.
So reading,
the
whole foundation of this is ki shalcha bincha, meaning I would say that I haven't read it,
right,
but it's like saying, oh, the guy doesn't know, so v'aftachlo.
So
answer him. So maybe if he knows the answer, you don't have to.
Maybe you're not far away, not far. Okay, so he quotes. So v'yesh lomar sho ilu mitzvah zo mutelt alenu achmat she'ilu lo otzianu adin. Right. So he says here. We have to suggest as follows, right? Because what's the whole point of the mitzvah is, like you said, the whole mitzvah is to l'saper sipur mitzvah Mitzrayim. Mechmat she'ilu, because had we not taken us out, we all still be in Mitzrayim, right? We'd still be galut, right? There's room for the people of Chachamim to say that they should be exempt. They might reason, even if they were still in Egypt, the Chachamim might be free to do what? Because of their Torah wisdom, we might think that because they're so smart, and I'm not getting into politics about why we might say that people are Torah learners and whatever. We won't get into that statement. So he quotes a wonderful statement, a wonderful Gemara that I have to be honest. When I heard this shiur today, it was the first time I ever heard this Gemara in my life. It was a fascinating Gemara. It's a great story. So he says like this. It's based on Sanhedrin, Daf Perek Yud Aleph of Sanhedrin, Daf Kuf Daled 104. It says, "Maaseh b'shnei bnei Adam shenishbu b'har Carmel, So he says basically what happens is, I'll tell you outside because it's basically a long story. Basically, these two Jews are walking outside in the Carmel in the north, and some bandit comes and takes them and holds them down at gunpoint. Bandita, right? So he says, and he takes the bandit says, "That's it, you two Jews, you're coming with me." He ties them up. And as they're walking around, I'm telling it outside because it's a long story. And he says, as he's walking along, the two Jews start talking to each other. He says, "Hey, you see, there's a one-eyed camel." And he says, not only is a one-eyed camel on one side of the camel, and the non-Jew's looking around. He says, "I don't see anything." And the guys and the other one Jew says to the guy, even though they're tied up, one Jew says to the other one, not only is he one-eyed, he's blind in one eye. He's carrying on one side, he's carrying wine, and on the other side, he's carrying olive oil. And the non-Jew is looking around, he can't find him. Can't see anything. He said, "What are you talking about?" And he says, not only that, but on one side, there's a Jewish, like a driver, a camel driver, and on the other side is a non-Jewish camel driver. So now the non-Jewish, this bandit is like going nuts. He's like, "I don't see anything. I don't see anything for miles. I don't see anyone." He's like, so the Jews say, go look in the fields, and you'll find it. So he says, I know your trick. So he ties him to a tree, and he says, "You guys stay right here while I go look." Sure enough, a few minutes later, this is all in the Gemara, by the way. This is not me making it up. Sure enough, he finds it. He finds the camel.
Die.
Yeah. Anyway, so he says. So the guy says, "How did you know?" So they say. So he says, "Chachamim." He says, "We knew." How did we know? Because when you walk a camel, he said we saw on the road. He says on the road. First of all, he said on the road. On one side, the road, the grass was it was eaten, and on one side it wasn't. A camel would never do that. A camel would walk straight and eat from both sides. So clearly he's blind on one side. And then he says, the bandit says, "How would you know? How did you know oil and wine? Like who know?" He said, "Like you said, the drippings. On one side, the oil. What happens to the oil? It leaves like a little stain. On the other side, wine doesn't leave a stain. It just gets absorbed, right? And how did you know Jew, non-Jew?" He says, "Jew, non-Jew. That's easy, because a Jew, us Jews, we're commanded that when we have to go to the bathroom, we go outside into the field. We kind of step aside. Non-Jews, they do whatever they want. They just go whatever." He says, "I don't understand." He says, "You guys are chachamim, and because you're chachamim, I'm going to let you go. And not only am I going to let you go, I'm going to honor you with a meal in my own home." This is what the Bennett says. This is what the Gemara says. Okay, so now the Zera Shimshon says, "V'chein," and he says, the Gemara, basically what he says there, after that whole thing, he says, Baruch, it says, "V'omer, Baruch ha'makom shebachar bezoro shel Avraham v'natan lehem michochmato, u'bechol makom she'em olchim nasim sarim la'adoneihem b'taram v'achlu levatem l'shalom." Right, that's what the Gemara says. The Shema Mina Shemishu Chacham Koneh Charut B'Chachmato. Meaning, he says, what? I'm free. The person who's smart, his own wisdom creates his freedom. Meaning, like I use my own. I create my wisdom. My wisdom allows me to kind of like outsmart the person or become successful, or I recognize my own freedom. Give me a good example of that, without looking at the next page.
Tax evasion. Tax planning.
Right. No, I'm talking about examples.
That's a good one.
Right. You outsmart. Right. You're using the system. You're the system.
You're within, but you're
right. Right. Anyway, by the way, they say that accountant. I'm not an accountant, but they say accountants know all the codes. They know all the ways to outsmart the system, and so you just have to ask them. They'll tell you. If you tell them, they'll tell you. Anyway, but give me a story from the Gemara, from the Torah, of a person who used his wisdom to outsmart and get to where he needs to be. Yosef HaTzadik. Right? So look, that's the next paragraph. What does he say? V'chein matzinu b'Yosef, shamar lo paro ein mavon v'chacham v'chamocha. Ata tiyeh al beiti. Right. V'chein mish yodeh ata Torah ein lecha ben chorin shelo ela misho. So he says, what happened with Yosef? Yosef started his day. He started the story in the bow, and he uses his wisdom and uses his connection to Hashem to outsmart, quote unquote, the system and rise to the ranks. So you would say what? And what do we know about the Torah says? Based on Pirkei Avot, it says, who's the person who's the most free? a person who is serving serving Mishosek B'Torah, right? So he says, Lachen kamash malan da'amagi she'afim chayvi. Even a person who is so smart, a person who's involved in Torah, and he's considered a ben chorin, right? You would say a person who's learning Torah all day is considered a ben chorin. He says, Atam hu shekol mishem marabel saper Mitzrayim harei ze mishubach v'im shar nashim achar sheyatzu yodei chovatam im kol ze heim mishubachim im yosifu al chovatam im kein af elu achachamim af shelefi datam im turim mikol makom lo gari mishar nashim lachar sheyasimu chovatam. He says that even though you would think that a person who's smart, who involves himself with Torah all day, and he's considered a ben chorin, you would think that he's patur. Right? Why? Because he knows the system, he knows the story, he knows it. He's so involved, he's so ben chorin already. You would think that no, he doesn't have to. So it's because everyone else is involved in the Torah. Everyone else during this time is kind of fulfilling their obligation, and since therefore they're by retelling the story, you would think you would say. So we have to say is that the Chachamim are no different. Meaning, just because yes, they may be considered ben chorin because they're involved themselves in Torah, he says they're not. Even though they may consider themselves pturim. Even though they should not be worse than the average person who is encouraged to say what? To keep on telling the story of Yetziat Mitzrayim. Meaning he's saying is that
after the average Joe,
Sipur, right? You would
then you've got the marbeh.
Right, exactly. So he's saying is that the idea here is that he says here, yeah. So he says at the very least it's prayed that they too should be telling the story of Yetziat Mitzrayim too, because at the end of the day. That's part. It's not. They're not ben chorin. The only way they can become ben chorin, had to become ben chorin, because they're learning Torah. It only happened after Yetziat Mitzrayim. So that yes, you think that maybe because they're so involved in Torah, they may be considered pturim. He says no, but the obligation that we have is not only the person who's the average person who says Yetziat Mitzrayim, and therefore he tells the Sipur Yetziat Mitzrayim, but even in addition to the Chachamim, who would otherwise might be considered pturim, there too. Hi.
Not yet.
Not yet, maybe.
You want something?
No.
Where's Simon? Tell him to eat.
Simon went to his friend.
Oh my God! Tell him I'm offended. What's that?
If you need it,
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
sorry to bother.
Not bothering. Yes, exactly. Charut al-Luchot. You would think that what's Charut? Charut, exactly. So that's number 2. That's the Torah number 2. It's a little piece within a bigger Torah. But that's a piece about Haggadah, so I thought we should learn something from the Haggadah about that. So that's number 2. And now we're going to go to the last one that I think I prepared for today. So you can take this one if that's not further. Okay, then we'll do.